Ladies and gentlemen, we love that you are joining us here and we hope that you could do us a favour. If you are liking our episodes, please share them. Tell us that you like them. Leave us a review and we will be eternally grateful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Wizard and the Priestess. I am Noor, your host, with my special other host.
Matt.
You like that?
Special.
Special other host.
One of the nicest things you've ever said to me.
I say many nice things and you say that line quite often, so I must be upping my game.
Mm-hmm.
I see we're both essentially mourning something today in our black, or are we getting deeply mystified?
Mystic AF.
You've got something on your shirt though. It's not completely
this
black.
is a Blackbird and Beast shirt from Amber and Stuart. They'll be on sale. Very comfy, really comfortable. But
Comfortable.
quick shout out.
You.
Yeah.
You can see the definition of your chest there too.
Oh, yeah. I did 700 push-ups before we recorded just so I could show it off.
Yeah, and I like the placement of that plant too.
Thank you. Thank you.
How are you, Matt?
Oh, well, Nuala. How's your mindset in regards to digestion this week?
Digestion's doing good. I actually had a thought just before I was going to share this to you, but like I feel like where I am right now, I'm in a bit of a like I was going to say that I feel like my life's on pause. Like where other than this, my life is essentially just being with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to say that it feels like my life's on pause, but actually it feels like it's not paused. Like my old life has completely ended. Like the shreds of my old life is completely upended at the end of last year and continued to like it almost felt like when we moved out of Cronulla, it sort of was like the end point actually met. And then through that eclipse portal that sort of happened most recently last week, it felt like it was kind of solidified that when there's never going back. Like it's just not that I ever planned to move and redo what I was already doing, but it's almost like so much of what I was doing is I'm never going back to that. And yeah, so that's been like, I don't know, I was going to tell you, I'm like, oh, I feel like my life's on pause and I don't know when it's going to start again. And as I went to tell you that, I realized that actually no, like this, so much of my life has ended now. And now from here so maybe that's why I'm wearing black. It's just like kind of the end of that, an end of an era and an end of a cycle. And yeah, here we go. Moving forward, being more conscious and more aware that I can't sit and stay in places that make me feel comfortable. I have to move from them if that seems to happen.
Well, it's just transition of energy, isn't it?
Absolutely.
How are you transitioning now?
Yeah, well, it's quite an interesting thing. I've been obviously, we're living in my mum's house. She lives on an acreage in a really beautiful place in the Hunter Valley, and it's there's a lot to do, which is lovely. Essentially keeps us busy. We're in the garden most of the day, unless I have something for the kids, an activity where we go to together and go playing. But right now, yesterday or on Monday as a family, we like built a mud kitchen for the kids, and just having that time together was really beautiful. And it was such a special space. So it's sort of an interesting thing to feel like we're just plodding along, really. Like we're actually just plodding along, whereas everyone else is trying to achieve something for the future by we obviously have a little bit of income, so that allows us to eat and have shelter. But I can really see and understand when we step away and see what's really important, that what is really important is just the slowness and watching my kids grow. It's been really cool. Aqua's starting to stand and walk. She's not walking just yet, but she's squatting up and down, and she'll like throw things on the ground just to squat down and pick it up, and then come up, and then throw it on the ground again and squat down and pick it up. And it's like she's just like, I don't know, training, but it's quite. I'm like just sitting watching her, and I could just if my kids let me just watch them, they would be the best story to watch. But they want me to play too, so sometimes I play too. But yeah, plotting is my new life at the moment. And obviously, there's always little bits in the background that are kind of like my mind's like, okay, and now we're going to go and learn something new and read a book. And, I've got like 10 other things going on, but they just come secondary to everything else that is the plotting. So, yeah,
Just a
that is,
realignment.
yeah, absolutely. And it feels really normal.
Mm.
It doesn't feel profound or exciting or anything. It just feels like, and such is life. Now, for some people, though, they tend to get belly upsets and they might find themselves, you know, feeling like they cannot consume what they really want to. And last week, we really jumped into my view on the fact that something happened to you.
Did we?
Now you can't,
I didn't really pick up on that. That we were,
can't eat eggs.
that
But
I
this
just made
week,
it all up. Yeah.
no, I didn't say you made it up. I want to reiterate that you didn't make it up. My belief is that something happened, and in the moment of something happened, eggs were involved. Whether it was that you had been consuming your eggs in the morning and your dad told you that, I don't know, the house is going for sale or whatever it might have been, and it was shocking and you weren't expecting it, and it didn't follow your normal pattern, and the shock in that, or the change in that, was what changed your body. Went to, oh my gosh, and in the moment you smelt those eggs and your body oh, like, I can't speak my truth potentially right now, like we spoke of that. And then slowly now that's what happens every time you consume eggs.
Every time I eat an egg,
You
someone's
can
house
see
gets
them though?
sold. That's probably fact.
Could be.
Mm.
Anyway, we were wanting to go into, so you did touch on this initially, but I kind of sidetracked us a lot because we hadn't prepared what I was going to tell you. But I was thinking, should we go back to that idea of, you mentioned last week about how what isn't spoken about in, say, the training sphere, or the like, people that are all about training and, very physical, and they might have basic nutrition knowledge, but they don't really have the skills of the kind of disease aspect of, say, for example, someone that has bloating or IBS symptoms, that's actually going to potentially impact their performance, their ability to train, and the functionality of their bodies.
Yeah, I don't think it's just training. I think it's general well-being. You go to a chiropractor, some chiropractors, very few physios in my experience, exercise physiologists, osteo, who else is out there?
Acupuncturist.
Acupuncturists. They, even a GP will rarely ask. They'll ask, what's your diet like? Every patient I think I've ever asked, 98% of them have said, yeah, no, it's great. But what does that mean? Everyone's got the best diet, but then, so why is your body full of inflammation? Why are you in so much pain? Why do certain muscles in your body not work? Why are they switched off? That's generally due to inflammation. And yes, there is a mental, emotional aspect to that, but there's also a biological happening going on. And whether it started in the mind or the body, we can debate that. I'm sure we will. But I don't think you can really you can't separate the mind and the body. So it's the chicken and egg is kind of irrelevant. The more it's there.
More for you.
It's there. It's there. So it needs to be addressed. It needs to be worked with. But most people coming in with some kind of pain, they have inflammation, unless they've been in a car accident or had a fall, whether it's neck, shoulder, lower back, big toe, whatever the problem area is, there is some kind of inflammation. And if you're having something in your diet, whether you believe it's good or not, that it is creating some kind of chemical reaction within your system that is promoting inflammation while you have a single atom of that food in your system,
Can
then
you explain how that happens? Like, so I think that broccoli is good for me, but every time I eat broccoli, I do rancid farts, and like, so it's obviously having some form of a issue. I actually also get like, red rash around my mouth, or, something is, I get a cough that lasts 3 weeks. So, broccoli being such a good food, but obviously having an impact on me, what is happening in my body?
well, obviously you believe that, so it's going to happen. So what happens? You get what's the first thing that happens?
None
What's,
of this happens. I'm just being an
oh,
example. I'm saying, oh, you wanted me to have an insight.
I'm just
You're like,
thinking
yes,
the Instagram
yes.
reels for this week.
Oh, no.
Right.
I don't have an intolerance to broccoli, but I would say that that's one of those things. It's like everyone thinks broccoli is good. Of course, it's good. Broccoli's fantastic, but if you're not actually digesting it well, now I could definitely take this from a different perspective again in terms of if you're having a response to broccoli that doesn't serve you, then I would say that there's something systemically from that digestion system specifically is weakened, and therefore you aren't able to digest and get the goodness out of the broccoli, because the broccoli itself shouldn't have that impact on you. But I would like you to give me what is actually happening inside my body when I have that atom that is, that my body is building up a response to. What is that response and what is happening?
Well, it's essentially a cytokine response, which is some people say that a food intolerance isn't an immune response. Some people say it's only an immune response with an allergy. I would, yeah, I could argue both sides
Just
of
use
that
what you would say. But what would
equally.
you say?
So what's happening there is you take on food, you produce mucus and saliva. Now, in your mucus and saliva contains your own DNA. Your own DNA is your blueprint and the antenna for the emergence. When you eat food, it's emergence between your internal external environment. Our immune systems are set up to be synergistic with our external environment. But if you're bringing something in that isn't synergistic with your own immune system, then you get overproduction of mucus. So you can get blocked up sinuses, and there are several sinuses, but they, depending on which strategy your body uses, it can be a sagittal sinus, frontal sinus, maxillary sinus, etc. So all of these things can create tension in the head, around the eyes, behind the eyes, nose, kind of middle of the skull from it'll be probably back to front. When it goes down the throat, the mucosal lining continues through the esophagus. So if that's your strategy, then you're going to get a croaky throat. The esophagus runs posterior behind the heart in through to the stomach. We have goblet cells in the stomach which produce hydrochloric acid. If that's your particular strategy, and we can add posture into it. So if you're hunched forward head posture, your rib cage will be depressed. So your stomach can't really move that well. Therefore, it can't produce hydrochloric acid in adequate quantities. Now, the stomach is the grounding pouch of the digestive system. So it takes the food, grounds it down into minute particles, then it goes through the pyloric valve, which then turns into the duodenum, which is the cocktail shaker. It then goes,
Why is that a cocktail shaker?
just because of the motility. If you look at the duodenum, it sits up against the spine. It's kind of like a C shape, but its motility sort of opens and closes like that. But
And
as
it's
it,
quite a lot. Is that what you mean?
hey,
It's quite a lot for how big it is, or
well, that's quite a busy organ because it's got bile, it's got pancreatic enzymes, it's got all kinds of stuff happening around it that's going into it. So it's getting this cocktail motion. It's been shaken, not stirred. As it's been shaken, then the smaller particles go into the small intestine for reabsorption and then the large intestine for elimination. That's what is supposed to happen. Depending on we call it subconscious weak link, which can be set up from a myriad of reasons. It could be genetic, it could be diet, lifestyle. This
likely an experience?
most likely an experience of some sort, yes. But then what's awoken that experience is probably more last week's chat. But we all have a genetic predisposition to something. Now, the usual factors that's going to make or break that is your diet and lifestyle. Lifestyle, you could include mindset practices, your beliefs, etc. So that can be put into there. So that's going to make or break or express or suppress that genetic susceptibility for that. Now, depending where you get the rash, depending where you get the inflammation is really individual. So we could have 10 different nullahs. One gets rancid farts, one gets redness around the mouth, one gets bloating, one gets headaches, one gets mind like brain fog, another one gets jittery, another one gets sleepy. All of these things are symptoms of a digestive system that isn't handling that food very well. And
that is because all of those symptoms that you've just described are a cytokine response and everything that you just shared. Is that right?
Indirectly like a cytokine response. We all have our own ways of expressing the intolerance.
Okay.
So for some people, it's bloating. For some people, it's headaches. For some people, it can be joint pain. For some other people, it can be runny nose, croaky throat, sore knees. The list goes on and on. But for each symptom, there's a myriad of other symptoms which cascade from that as well. So one example that's really, really, really common in people with typically joint pain, especially lower back and knees, is they get bloating in the small intestine, in which the microscopic microvilli, which are supposed to be microscopically tight, have to become more permeable to let more water in to allow more space because of the inflammation. It'll become more permeable to let more water in because if there's inflammation, the best thing to put out fire is water. So as it expands, it pushes out into the abdominal wall, switching off the core muscles, which are there to help design to protect the spine. But then that mechanism is now switched off, all because of that bit of broccoli in Nula's rancid experience.
Yeah. And I would say that there is something, yeah. Okay. All right. Yes. Interesting. There is a lot going on in our human body, isn't there?
Fair bit.
And now we have understood that there is, say, for example, this broccoli issue. Broccoli actually isn't serving. Now, how do we go about training? If like we shared last week, you said that, is it any sort of digestive disruption, or is it specifically an allergen or an intolerance that is going to make us more susceptible to issues in training?
Digestive stuff is one issue, but it's probably the most overlooked and you're not going to get. I mean, what do you do in regards to training? Don't eat the food. And it's probably not going to be broccoli, just so we're clear to the listeners. However, if you do have thyroid issues, raw broccoli could create issues. It needs to be cooked or steamed. But generally, you've got to leave out that food for, I would say, at least 3 or 4 days before going into a heavy workout again.
Because you're going to be in that heightened inflammation. Is this coming back to that? Remember, we spoke about when our pulse rate is going to be heightened. Would we find that in those 3 to 4 days that your blood pressure or pulse rate would be higher?
Could be, absolutely, yeah.
Because what was that was higher?
So
Why was that? That was a fatigue.
It's likely going to be higher. Have you ever heard of nutcracker syndrome?
Nope.
So nutcracker syndrome is where you've got down, if you're looking at the body front on, down the left side of the spine, you've got the descending aorta.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a thoracic, abdominal, pelvic portion of the aorta. Coming off the aorta at around L1, 2, comes the superior mesenteric artery, which is a branch of the mesenteric artery, which feeds the small intestine with blood. Now, that artery, as it travels posterior to anterior, it kind of crosses over the left renal vein. Left renal vein is your drainage system for your left kidney. Now, what can happen once you get bloated? That artery gets pulled. Therefore, that left renal vein gets kind of inked, like clamped type thing. Then the left kidney will get really, really heavy. So that when fatigue, a heavy organ will create fatigue. Once that can't be drained, then you've got, clamping the hose at this end. Down the other end, it starts to balloon and get bigger. So that when you have a pulse, especially if it's in the abdomen, you shouldn't have a pulse in your abdomen.
No.
But that's when that happens. But if a pulse is happening down there, it's likely going to be too quick. And so a pulse somewhere else is going to be too slow. But that's the pulse most doctors will look at, the slow pulse. So I've had people on the treatment table come in with diagnosed low blood pressure, and you'd feel their pulse at their radial pulse, and it's quite slow and relatively weak. But then their abdomen is pumping itself. So, and that's usually from some kind of irritation within the system. Did you see that clinically as well?
Someone's abdominal pulse.
Or just inflammation in the gut?
Yeah, I mean, you'd see it, but it would be how I would treat it would always be correlated to how someone was feeling or how they weren't feeling, like the things that they were suppressing. It would be any digestive issue from my perspective has something to do with or had something to do with what they were feeling, and especially with women. I had something really cool that I used to think about with this, but I've lost it right now. But just thought about, like, particularly with people with women with IBS and how you try and do the things, you try and eliminate the toxin or eliminate the thing that is the intolerance, the thing that's making you react. And then in eliminating it, you hope for the answer. But I see time and time again that it's not, from my perspective, something that you're digesting in your mouth. It's something that you're digesting in your mind and in your heart. And when those pieces, like, because you're a whole human, you can't really separate them. But the brain or the system itself and everything that you've just described to me tells me that the system has correlated something with that molecule or that food with a way to remember what was going on in the time. And so
it is a memory. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess that's why we shouldn't eat when we're stressed, or we shouldn't um maybe like, put ourselves in stressful situations. you know, um, that's such an interesting one for me. I naturally would be like, okay, well, I have to do this. Like, I have to go and do this thing. And so I would go and do it. And then now I've learned, like, no, I'm actually not going to. Like, it's just a no. If that would make me feel stressed out, I'm not going to bother going. But then I have to understand, why would it make me feel stressed out? Like, what is the underlying reason why that would stress me out in the first place? And that's probably going to get me closer to what's actually going on. So I fully trust that everything that you've shared and about what the body's doing and what it is actually doing. But it's the piece of where that's coming from that we can't quite, if we just take something out of the system, it's almost like we need to create a new relationship with that thing. And I remember a few years ago when someone I knew had their child had a peanut allergy as a little child. And that was, I don't know what had noticed, but I think they say that the first time you're like you create your body creates a response, you might get something mild. And then the second time it will be a lot, and the third time will amplify or be less. And like I said last week, we don't want to test with these things. I'm not recommending you go out and like, let's just try it, see if the second time it goes away or the second time makes it worse. Like, no, not recommending that at all. It is an interesting thing, though, that the allergen specialist, I don't know what they're called, pediatrician that's focused on allergies in little children, have changed the way that they recommend people go about that. And now, once again, just want to reiterate, I'm not suggesting you do anything like this. If you're noticing these things, speak to your health professional about it. But consider that it's more about the relationship that child now has with that food over it is the food itself. Now, that doesn't mean to say that there's not, some foods have maybe more commonly known reactions, but what they suggested was that you did reintroduce that food after the 3-4 day mark, and then reintroduce it quite regularly, a low amount.
At that 3-4 day mark.
I don't know. I don't know, but I think give you, if you've had a reaction, give it 3 to 4 days so that you're moving out of that inflammatory response. But then after that, start to introduce it every day at a small amount. Now, then from what you've shared, you would be having a slight inflammatory response. And what I was sharing last week, maybe in doing that, you're actually rewiring that biological conflict or that thing that happened that made you scared of it, or the body scared of it in the first place, that gave this over. Because realistically, an intolerance or an allergy is essentially an overreaction. We are meant to react that way to poison. We are meant to react that way to things that aren't serving, but we're not necessarily meant to react that way to life in general.
Could you maybe even, would it be, let's say, accurate to say that we've just been wired to become almost fearful in our environment from such an early age that we potentially react to anything?
Absolutely. And I think that is like, we are so on edge as a society. We have been, we are on edge all the time. We are on edge that we have enough money. We are on edge that we can be a good enough parent. We are on edge that we can pay the bills. We are on edge that we're doing the right thing for everything. In New South Wales especially, we are on edge that we're driving the right way.
Some
There's
people
so
are
many.
even on edge about not even being on edge.
Totally.
They need an
Like,
edge to be on.
I'm so calm. Get me back to the edge. The precipice felt safe. And that is what we've actually that's what we actually believe, is that the safest place for me is on the edge, because on the edge, I know that I have control to either like, if I jump, we're gone, or whatever it is. But if I'm not at the edge, well, then I don't know the only option in front of me. But I just think that as a society, we are moving too fast not in the way that we're not meant to. Mm, now let me think about how I'm going to say this. I was going to say, let's let technology take the pace.
That's what?
Let technology take the pace. Like, let's let computers and all of that do the thing. Let's let AI technology do the thing that it's meant to do. Now, I say that and I'm like thinking, no, I'm not suggesting that we become iRobot and like robots rule the world and all of a sudden we die because the computer wanted us dead. I don't really truly believe that because technology, whilst it can be used for evil, I don't see it as evil. Um, and I don't know that you can really program in evil. Maybe you can. I mean, obviously they're going to come up with something evil. Evil people, evil things create evil. But
Hurt people, Nuala.
yes, yes. So as we all transform and transition, I'm hoping that you listeners feel this too, that you're actually adjusting yourselves as well, and you can feel that your heart is beating bigger and making you want to do better things. And so let's let the pace be taken off us and let's slow down in here. And I truly believe that one thing that makes us run really fast is scarcity. And I remember there's a movie, I can't remember what it's called, but essentially like the richest people move slowly and the poor people move fast because it's time. And you have this thing on your arm and it's like,
Oh, is
if
that what they
you
got X amount of days and hours or whatever to
yeah.
live?
And
Yeah.
you die once you've got no hours left. And anyway, yeah, and like everyone follows the rules. Like if everyone's like so bound by those rules and like you don't just give off a few minutes or a few hours, you know. Anyway, the moral of the story is that if we sort of allow ourselves to come back, there is abundance for all. We don't live in these melodramas that we think we do. And I truly think that if we are to slow down a little more, and introspect more, we will find that a lot of our intolerances dissipate because we are not being as reactive to the environment with which they are in. Or our body, if your perspective could be that our body is more capable of digesting that atom. Now, that's not to say that like how slow do you need to go to like relieve yourself of an egg allergy? I'm not sure. But I think that there is something in that. And I think that there's something in finding our way back to a softer way of living and a slower pace. And I definitely am a country gal now, and I live like it is a real community here where I'm living. It is like people care about you. If you want to be cared for, you can go and you can be cared for here. And I'm not saying like you can go out and they're just going to look after you, but it's more that everyone wants the best for the people here. And
I'd say it's probably the same in Sydney, but except for the caring bit.
yeah. And I think it's really hard because if you're from, like, I'm from Sydney, grew up there, lived there like a lot of my adult life. Then I moved to Sweden and lived there and traveled around for a season, for a 7-year cycle. And then I moved back to Australia and lived back in Sydney again, for another 7-year cycle. And now I'm transient, but living in the country, and I can feel the difference.
Mm.
It is palpable and the vibration. And I didn't truly believe it until I left. But the energy is not good. When you walk down the street and people don't smile at you, you shouldn't live there. And I can walk down the street, and I had done in Cronulla, and I would see people I knew or had known in cycles prior, seasons before, and they would look away. And
I'll
maybe
pay
that
them to
was
do that.
yeah. Maybe that was because something happened and I can't really remember it. But it also is like we are seasons and cycles beyond whatever that was. I haven't seen you in 10 years. And instead of looking and smiling, we would choose to look away. And I think like let's bring that back to an intolerance or an allergy. Like we are afraid of our external environment. And I wonder whether there are more allergies and intolerances in little children in big cities than there are in little cities. And peanut butter is everywhere and eggs. So it
Yes.
would be it would be very interesting to know what it is like. And that would pretty much, I'm pretty certain I already know the answer.
And you could also look at that symbolically as well. What
Mm.
are you finding? What's going on in life that's hard to digest, like a situation? What situation are you finding, quote unquote, hard to swallow? All these things manifest subconsciously and they express themselves consciously. And have you heard of illness behavior?
No, but the word makes sense.
Yeah. So it's people that talk themselves into it consciously. So people who say, oh, that person makes my head hurt. They come in with headaches. Well, that person's a pain in the ass. I've got lower back pain or I'm constipated. Or the person that keeps holding on to crap, they're constipated. Or that makes my stomach hurt. They've got anxiety or other digestive stuff. So these things often that we say, but also perceive, and we might be lightheartedly joking at the same time, but our subconscious hears it, has no biases, and all the 50 to 100 trillion cells are directed by that thought and that word, and they perform the deed, and we wear that as well.
Yeah, the belief of that is 100% in everything. But I would say that in a flip of that, we'll look at our power. Look what we can do. So that is what you have inside of you. You can turn the script on that. You can change the energy around that, and you can in turn adjust your beliefs. And so if you, instead of saying they are a pain in my ass or whatever and be constipated, you could say, wow, they are teaching me profound lessons and my body functions well. And I think that we can have the nuance of what we spoke about last week and this week and see that they are sort of just two parts of the same, two sides of the same coin, in a sense that everything that's happened to us or that we've been a part of in this cosmic dance of life has affirmed for us the different beliefs that we continue to walk around with on our shoulders or wearing as part of us. We wear it in the way our body placement is. We wear it in the way that our skin lines are, or we wear it in the way that our body moves. And so these things have been affirmed for us over and over and over. In order for us to heal from these ailments, we have to change that belief system. And we know that starts with a thought, just like we started as a thought. I'm not saying that once you have an intolerance that this is the only way forward, but it feels pretty fitting for me in the sense of, walking with Hampus at the moment in this kind of cancer diagnosis and choosing to step away from it. And I think it's been quite an interesting journey we've had, like, I think there's quite a few people that, because they haven't seen the scans, they find it hard to believe that we've chosen to do what we did. Like, how could you choose not? And I think that's the same with anyone with any illness, and whether that's an allergy or whatever. It starts with a thought and a projection and the intel that comes from the heart, the intel that comes from that soul or that psyche, that deep knowing of the direction that you should take. And we're so good at dampening that sound
So,
that,
what would you say to someone who just can't get the mental bit just yet, to start them off really simple, really superficial?
well, I think that this is where someone like yourself or seeing a clinician or a practitioner, that is why, or a really good stepping stone or a really good reason to go and be with someone that is a practitioner that can if you want to go down that route with like a, say, a naturopath or a holistic integrative doctor and do the blood work that can give you a little bit more of a breakdown. Like you shared last week, you went and did a blood test and it showed that you were quite reactive to eggs. So there we have it in a sense. Um, that could be a really good step to start to really understand specifics in that sense. Um, I would personally go in a really, I'd go deeper straight away. I wouldn't pussyfoot around with that. And I'm not saying that's a bad option. I'm not saying that you shouldn't speak with naturopaths. I think what they offer is fantastic. And I have plenty, we know plenty that do great work with people and humans. And we all have practitioners that serve us. Um, I come from a place now of being, split open and in the moment of that happening, I was already broken. I'd already just lost, not just lost, but just separated or been separated from a huge part of my life over the season of parenthood. And that I was at a very, very low place to then be given this like, oh, here you go, you know. Um, it was like I needed to feel the full depths of low. And I think that is why, and we've spoken about this before, but once you get to that point, there is no other way. You only go the way the intuition guides you, because if you go any other way, you will lose yourself. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people when you've got an intolerance after an intolerance or an impact, you're being like, you feel like life is pushing you around.
That's also
And
symptomatic of intuition being shut off because of the sensation that your body is clogged up. So you're not that clear vessel, that alignment where energy and information can flow through you, because you can't interpret that. You interpret that as there's too much coming in, so it becomes overwhelming. So then you start eating something as comfort, and then you just get into that loop non-stop,
yeah.
where you really
And
have to identify what that pattern is, but then you don't necessarily have to change the habit, but just change what's in the cup or what's in the cupboard,
oh yeah.
and then
And
clean your system out first so you can actually get clear signals from that.
yeah, because the more clear those signals are, the more easeful they are to receive, and the more capable we are of utilizing the information that's coming through. And it's quite hard, I think, because I can personally attest to sticking to something because there were good bits, being in a relationship with someone for a long period of time, you tend to focus on the good bits because yes, there's bad bits, but you're in relation with humans, you're going to hit bad moments, there's going to be rough patches, or you're going to feel no matter what. Like I've been with Hampus for 14 years and there was a good chunk of there in there that we would, that you'd probably add together if you put it all in one lump. It could be months or a year or whatever where we weren't, functioning really beautifully and smoothly. So it's just like, but if it keeps coming and going, you think that, okay, it's all right, I can move through this. I can continually move through this until someone in the relationship goes, no, actually, we can't move through this anymore. We are not going to continue. I don't, you know what I mean? I'm going to stop that there. And that could be you in a sense of um, your relationship to eggs. I'm going to stop that there, and we're no longer going to be connected until such time as I might figure out what it is that might, um, you know, what it is. Do I want to find out? Do I want to figure out what that might be? Or, maybe it's just easier to not be in that, to not coexist.
What
Um,
about a typical person who, let's say they've had a suboptimal diet for a while, and they do have inflammation and bloating, but it's probably it's either at a really low level, or they're so used to it, they're numb to it. Now,
yeah.
what advice would you give to someone in that situation?
So someone who doesn't want to listen to themselves and
pretty much.
doesn't want to have any, well, you know what? I reckon just do what they're doing. Because as someone who doesn't do that, you and I included in this, we can only, it's taken me a long time as a clinician to actually accept that people are where they are. And you can give them one little piece and hope that it gives them something more. But it is actually not worth it to do anything more than that. Because what I've learned is I've been pushing many a hard stone up a very steep hill. And in the end, I remember through COVID, I was sharing with people nothing that was not meant to be not shared from a APRA standpoint.
Oh,
I was just expressing to people the
the
way
truth.
I was living.
Hmm.
And
COVID, there's
I
no time for truth in the law. We know this.
but it was very hard.
Hmm.
It was a very hard time for people to meet me where I was and to understand if they were not there. And I gave all the information that I had read. I gave them the studies. You know, I was reading the papers. I was expressing. I was showing them what I was reading, which was being read by lots of people. Right? It wasn't just me. I hadn't just come up with the science. The science was all over the world, but people were, you know, we were choosing which bits were serving who, and that was what was being shared in mass media. And I mean, it was the same in the other side, right? There was a lot of cherry picking of all data, no matter where you were on the spectrum of what COVID was all about. It was cherry picked, depending on what you wanted to prove. But the whole stuff itself was cherry picked from the beginning. But I personally found that I was pushing a lot of heavy stones up steep, steep hills. And eventually they just like rolled past me because they ended up doing whatever someone told them to do. Like if they, you know, they'd come into me and they'd be like, oh, I've got all these problems and I feel this way. And I'd be like, you know what? You don't need to concern yourself. Like, I will be your teammate. I will support your renegade. I am here for you. And then next minute they're like rolling down the hill because they're like, oh no, that was all just too hard.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think like that's what I think. If you are a person that are not in tune with yourself, or at the very least, so I can personally attest to this. Recently, I have had some huge unfoldings occur, apart from the whole like life shake stuff, but my own internal world has sort of been shaken up and brought to the surface. And I've gone, oh shit, I never saw that before. I'd never understood that from that perspective. And I like there was something in it, like there was something substance to this feeling, like what was that? And then now I'm like, wow, I really understand myself at a deeper level again. Another level, another layer of the onion has come off. And hopefully will stay off and I can continue to move forward with that and move forward in that direction where I am being a person that is more, you know, softening all edges, you know.
Mm.
And I think that let's bring that full circle in that sense of today, that we're steady on these edges, we're on edge. And what we really need to do is get off the edge and start to soften in. And I think the more that we do that, the more that our body can adjust its beliefs, the more that our whole soul can, you know, start to replay a program that is more in line with what we want and our purpose of being here in the first place.
Yeah, as you were talking, I had a flashback of when I was doing some research in psychology. Have I told you about William Kelly's research about the 4 types of clients?
Potentially. No, tell me about William.
So you were just reminding me with people who don't really have a relationship with their body and, you know, let them, I guess, do what they're going to do because you're not going to stop them doing what they're going to do anyway. He was talking about there's 4 types of client you're ever going to work with. And to put this into a listener's perspective, if you are in some kind of pain or discomfort, consider yourself a client. and pick which one you feel that you really are, but sit with it first and see what resonates to you most. Client 1 is the type of person who's going to listen to everything that you do and is going to heal relatively quickly. Client, let's say 2 or 2, not B.
2.
2.
2. 1, then 2.
1 and 2. Client 2 is the opposite of client 1. Client 3 is the person who's unconsciously in love with their symptoms and they use it as leverage or a power play against others. That's probably the most common I would see clinically. Then there's client 4 who it's you really got to look at their soul contracts, because some people need to go through that particular journey. And if you're a client or a patient of a therapist or a practitioner, there's a lesson in that for you. So look at that. Now, most people, when I say this kind of speech to people, they'll say, oh, I must be client 4 straight away. And then as soon as I say that, I say, congratulations, you've just qualified for client 3. Because now you're telling yourself that you can't be fixed or that you can't be healed or whatever is going on. So the more you tell yourself that, the more you're disconnecting yourself from yourself. The more you disconnect yourself from yourself, you dampen yourself to those messages that your body's clearly trying to tell you about your backache, your headache, your bloating, poor digestion, whatever your symptom is. And for a lot of people, they don't want to see that bigger truth, and they're not ready nor comfortable just to give up their shit.
Yeah, and that's okay, because we all are where we are and we've all got a purpose. And, you know, I've been told that there's certain people in my life that will never meet me where I am. And that seems like the best thing for me was to find acceptance in that. So wherever you are is exactly where you're meant to be, intolerance and all.
Obviously listening to us right now.
Yeah. But if you are keen to really shift, if you're feeling open and called, Matt is a wizard, and he is someone who will transmute you from that number 3, ideally towards a number 1 client, so that you can actually do the thing that you're meant to do, and to help start shifting those things inside of yourself that are not fully serving you, and start shifting yourself back to a path that is yours, and that is your empowered path.
Do you know, I was actually working with a client who swallowed some Scrabble pieces and they ended up going to the hospital. Still no word yet.
He didn't swallow enough? I'm glad you got that in there. I was feeling a bit...
We'll get it out.
Felt like we missed it
Pressure's
today,
gone.
but you got it. That feel like, oh, yes. Nailed it.
Boom.
All right, guys. Hope that's your joy for the week, and we'll be back here next time. But feel free to send us in any questions. I was actually going to suggest that send us a little voice note. We have a little voice note app that's connected to our Instagram, and if you want to be heard,
it's on the website too.
We might even. It's on the website, yep. But if you want to be, if you want to do that as a voice note, you could have the opportunity to be played on the podcast itself, which is exciting. You want to give yourself a shout out or give someone a shout out, we're also open to that. So just go onto our Instagram or onto our website and send us a little voice memo.
And thank you all for listening. Look forward to share next time.
Have a good week.
Ciao.
Peace.
You've been listening to The Wizard and the Priestess. Thanks for stopping by. Stay connected, and be open.